You've felt it before. Someone walks into a room and the air reorganizes. Not because they're loud, not because they're trying to win the room. They don't even claim attention. And still everyone's posture shifts. Maybe you looked away first. Maybe you suddenly became aware of your own voice, your own smile, your own role. Like you were being watched without being judged. Because there's a kind of presence that doesn't demand anything from you. And that's what your nervous system can't decode. Most people are readable. They want approval, they want control, they want to be liked. Even their confidence has a hook in it. Please confirm I'm enough. But this person, the strangest part is they don't want anything from you. No permission, no validation, no reaction. And when you can't read someone's need, you can't play the usual game. So the mind panics. It starts scanning. What are they thinking? Why are they so calm? What do they know? You start talking faster. You start over-explaining. And you don't even know why. And the worst part, they don't correct you, they just let you hear yourself. Carl Jung spent his life studying what happens when a person stops living from masks and starts living from the integrated core. Different traditions give that final maturity different names. In a Jungian lens, it resembles the wisdom archetype, often symbolized as Sophia. Not knowledge, not information, but a quiet intelligence that sees through illusion. And here's the uncomfortable truth. When someone becomes integrated enough, their silence stops being empty. It becomes unavailable to manipulation. It becomes untouchable by provocation. It becomes a mirror so clear that people feel exposed without a single accusation. You've probably met someone like this. They listened more than they spoke. And when they did speak, it didn't sound like performance. It sounded like reality. Being near them made you want to do one of two things: confess everything or leave. Because their presence doesn't attack you. It simply reveals the distance between who you pretend to be and who you actually are. What you're about to hear isn't comfortable, but it is freeing. By the end of this, you'll understand why the quietest people are often the most unhookable. Why wisdom doesn't announce itself. Why letting go isn't weakness. It's the final power move. And why silence, when it comes from someone who's done the inner work, doesn't just end conversations. It ends illusions. Here's the thing nobody wants to admit. You're not one person. You're a collection of parts pretending to be whole. There's the version of you at work, the version with family, the version with friends, and the version of you at 3:11 a.m. staring at the ceiling, thinking things you'd never say out loud. Microscene. You read a message, it's harmless, 2 lines. And your stomach drops anyway. Not because of the words, because of what they touch. That's not overthinking. That's your inner fracture reacting from a hidden part of you. Jung's motto was simple and brutal. At the surface, the ego, your I, the character you call me. Around it, the persona, the social mask you wear to function, to be acceptable, to be safe. Under that, the shadow, the parts you disown to earn love, approval, belonging. And the shadow doesn't disappear. It accumulates weight in the dark. That's why small things can trigger disproportionate reactions. That's why you randomly get defensive. That's why you say something sharp and later think, where did that come from? It came from the part you refuse to meet. Jung also observed an inner contrasexual dynamic. The anima in many men, emotion, receptivity, relatedness. And the animus in many women, assertion, clarity, boundary, agency. Not as stereotypes, but as psychological energies we tend to split when culture rewards one side and punishes the other. Microscene. A man feels emotion rising and jokes instead. A woman feels anger rising and swallows it, smiles, changes the subject. Both call it maturity, but it's often just dissociation with better manners. And beneath all of it, deeper than ego and roles, Jung pointed to something like an organizing center. The self, capital S. Not your biography, not your resume. A deeper center that tries quietly to make you whole. Stakes line why it matters. And until you integrate this, you'll keep calling your unconscious personality. Most people never meet the self. They spend their lives reinforcing the persona, defending the ego, and outsourcing their pain. You can feel that pressure, can't you? Every distraction, every unnecessary explanation, every time you reach for your phone to avoid a feeling, every time silence makes you restless. That's not random. That's your system trying to outrun the fracture. Jung warned when an inner situation isn't made conscious, it gets lived as fate. Patterns repeat, relationships loop, self-sabotage returns like a season. And here's the line that changes everything. You don't fix fragmentation by becoming a better mask. You become whole by integrating what you've been avoiding. Not self-improvement, self-integration. And that demands a kind of death. There's a moment when the performance starts to suffocate you. When the role you've been playing stops feeling like success and starts feeling like a cage. Jung called the beginning of this awakening individuation. The process of becoming what you actually are, not what you were trained to perform. But hear what people don't say out loud. Waking up requires dying. Not physically, psychologically. You'll outgrow versions of yourself that once kept you alive. Think of someone who irritates you instantly. The needy coworker, the attention-seeking friend, the arrogant relative, the victim who never changes. Now brace yourself. Very often, what hooks you in them points to something in you. A trait you disowned, a hunger you deny, a weakness you shame, a power you fear. Not every irritation is projection, but enough of them are to change your whole life once you see it. Someone interrupts you. Your face stays polite, but inside something volcanic rises, too big for the moment. That's not about the interruption. That's about the part of you that hasn't been allowed to take up space. Jung considered shadow projection one of the great traps. You start fighting enemies that are actually mirrors. Integration begins when you can say, yes, I am capable of that too. Not acting it out, not excusing it. Just acknowledging your full range. And something strange happens. When you stop defending a fake innocence, people can't expose you anymore. Their attacks don't find a target. Because you've already told yourself the truth. Many men are trained to amputate softness, grief, receptivity. Then wonder why life feels dry. Many women are trained to amputate anger, directness, boundary. Then wonder why life feels small. This isn't a moral failure, it's conditioning. You type a paragraph, delete it, type again. Because you're still trying to manage how you're perceived. Instead of expressing what you actually mean. But wholeness requires the return of the missing half. When the inner opposites integrate, you become harder to categorize. And what can't be categorized can't be controlled as easily. You can be gentle without being compliant. Direct without being cruel. Soft without collapsing. Strong without becoming rigid. Someone tries to provoke you. Old you would either explode or shrink. But now you do something new. You hold eye contact, you breathe, you choose. That's integration. Not destroying ego, ego is necessary. But dethroning it. Because ego wants control, certainty, identity. The self wants wholeness, truth, integration. This is the shift from I am my story. I am the awareness witnessing my story. And when you taste that even briefly, your compulsions lose some of their grip. You stop being as blackmailable by fear. You stop being as buyable by approval. And from the outside, it looks like silence. But it isn't emptiness. It's presence. And presence, real presence, unnerves people who are still performing for their own mirror. Across cultures, there's an archetype of wisdom. Not intellect, not education, but piercing clarity. The Greeks called it Sophia. In other traditions, she appears under different names, different symbols, same function. A kind of knowing that doesn't come from collecting facts, but from removing what's false. In a Jungian frame, Sophia resembles the highest maturation of the inner feminine wisdom function. Not feminine as gender, but as a mode of perception, receptive, integrative, truth-oriented. And it doesn't operate like logic. It operates like gnosis, direct knowing. You've felt this. You meet someone and you sense something is off. No proof, no argument. Just a quiet internal no. Microscene. They're smiling, they're saying the right things. But your body doesn't relax. Your chest tightens. Your system is reading what your mind is trying to ignore. Most people override that. They rationalize. They explain away their intuition. They trust words over energy and then pay for it later. But the integrated person doesn't do that. Not from paranoia. From wholeness. And that produces 4 traits that make their silence feel dangerous to illusion. Pattern interrupt test pulls abstraction back to lived reality. Here's the test: who gets angry when you don't react. Not judgmentally, not superior. They simply perceive the underlying motive. You can't charm them into ignoring reality. You can't confuse them with theatrics. Around them, people feel oddly transparent. Because the mask isn't being attacked, it's just not being bought. They're not trapped in simplistic binaries, good, bad, right, wrong, angel, devil. They can hold complexity without needing to win. That makes them immune to moral bait. You can't control them through guilt the way you can control someone who still hates parts of themselves. They can love without clinging, act without needing credit, speak truth without demanding agreement. This is the rarest form of strength. They aren't controlled by outcome obsession. So they're hard to leverage. Not silent treatment, not avoidance. Silence as the natural consequence of someone who isn't internally scrambling. When you try to provoke them, they don't reflexively react. They observe. And that observation forces your projection to return to you. You throw a sharp comment. They don't flinch. No counterattack, no defense. Just a pause so clean it makes you hear yourself. That pause is a mirror. And mirrors feel threatening to people who survive by distortion. Most social life runs on a primitive pattern. Stimulus right arrow reaction. Button right arrow response. People learn what triggers you. They learn what makes you defend. They learn what makes you over-explain. And if they can control your reaction, they can control the entire interaction. But something happens when you insert consciousness. You pause, you breathe, you choose, and the old game collapses. Someone tries the usual tactic: tone, accusation, bait. Old you would rush to fix the misunderstanding. But now you notice something. They're not seeking understanding, they're seeking control. So you stop talking, and suddenly they don't know what to do with you. Because conscious silence isn't passive. It's refusal. Not refusal of the person, refusal of the pattern. This is what breaks manipulation. If you've integrated shame, guilt loses its grip. If you've faced fear, threats lose power. If you've stopped begging for validation, flattery stops working. If you've stepped out of roles, drama can't assign you a part. But here's the deeper reveal. Silence isn't a tactic, it's a symptom of integration. When you don't have to protect an image, you stop needing constant words. When you're not negotiating your worth, you stop performing your personality. And there's a biological layer to this too. A regulated nervous system can co-regulate a room. An unregulated one tries to recruit chaos. That's why some people escalate when you don't react. Your calm feels like a threat to their strategy. So they push harder. And if you stay centered, truth appears fast. Either they soften and something real finally happens, or they reveal exactly who they are when they can't control you. Either way, reality reveals itself. And this creates a filtering effect. People who are ready for truth feel drawn to your steadiness. People who need illusion feel exposed and retreat. You don't have to attack anyone. Your presence sorts the room for you. In Jungian psychology, what we fear most isn't aggression. It's integration. Because an integrated person becomes difficult to recruit into unconscious systems. The loudest person in the room is easy to predict. So is the manipulator. So is the tyrant. Their patterns are obvious. But the person who has faced themselves, shadow opposites fear, craving, image, becomes unhookable. And that threatens every system built on hooks. Someone who's met their shadow can recognize yours faster. Not to shame you, just to see the pattern. Someone who's balanced inner opposites can't be trapped in polarity. You can't force them to pick a side just to control their identity. Someone who's tasted the self doesn't collapse into roles. Villain, hero, victim, savior. They can participate without being possessed. Now there's one critical warning here. The most volatile person isn't the unconscious person. It's the half-aware person. Someone who has gained insight but still uses it to protect ego. They can speak the language of depth while acting out the same old hunger for power. In a Jungian lens, that's shadow wearing spiritual clothing. But the one who completes the work, they become dangerous in a different way. They're dangerous to groupthink because they keep their conscience. Dangerous to manipulation because fear and flattery don't steer them. Dangerous to false hierarchy because titles don't hypnotize them. Dangerous to illusion because they won't pretend for your comfort. Concrete upgrade replaces dangerous to suffering grandeur. They suffer, but they don't leak it onto everyone else. Not perfect, not invincible. Whole, and wholeness in a fragmented world is revolutionary. Because you can't buy it. You can't shame it. You can't threaten it into compliance. You can only mite it or move away from it. And that's why the most powerful person in the room may be the one saying the least. Not because they're withholding. Because they're no longer begging reality to be different. If something in you is tightening right now, good. That's the part of you that knows this is real. The self doesn't shout. It pulls, and it usually pulls hardest when your old identity stops working. Hear how you know this path is calling you. You're exhausted by your own mind. The explaining, the proving, the rehearsing. The masks don't fit anymore. You can feel the cost of pretending, and you don't want to pay it. Surface answers irritate you. Not because you're above people, because you can't survive on noise anymore. You're starting to notice projection. You catch yourself mid-reaction and think, what is this really about in me? And silence, real silence, is starting to feel like medicine. Even if it scares you. If those signs are present, you're at the threshold. So here's the practice, tight, simple, real. Write one dream line every morning, no perfection, just contact. Sit, breathe, let images arise, dialogue instead of suppressing. When you react strongly, write what you don't want to admit. That's where the gold is. No phone, no music, just witness your mind without obeying it. If you live in thinking, practice feeling. If you live in feeling, practice clarity. This isn't a weekend fix. It's a life. You will lose identities that used to protect you. You may lose relationships that required you to stay the same. You will meet parts of yourself you avoided for years. But on the other side of that fire is a quiet kind of freedom. the freedom to respond instead of react, to love without clinging, to act without needing applause, to sit in silence and feel whole. That's the Sophia archetype in you, wisdom reclaiming your life from performance. Not to become colder, but to become uncontrollable. Not to punish anyone, to stop abandoning yourself. And the question isn't whether you're capable. The only question is whether you're willing to let go. Until there's nothing left to defend. Because when there's nothing left to defend, you become unavailable to the game. And that's what people misunderstand as danger. It isn't danger to them. It's danger to illusion. So if you feel the call, answer it. Not loudly, not dramatically, just consistently, in the silence beneath your next reaction.